Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the channel. We're live from Los Angeles. This is your host, Young Brando, talking about watches. We're going to start with some important news. I was going to share this with you yesterday, but I was expecting an update, a revision on the article and edit, which didn't happen. It's not a big deal. It's not my responsibility after all. Uh, but I was featured on this British GQ piece on the watch that Daniel Craig wore on uh, his appearance at the 50th Toronto International Film Festival. And of course, he has already moved on, right? He is no longer the 007. He's no longer Bond. Pardon me. But I did have that feature on the watch from a few days back where uh, I was, speculating a little bit. And apparently that got the attention of an editor at British GQ who passed it on to their um, person on watches and jewelry, Vivian Morelli. And she reached out to me directly and asked me whether I would like to share my expert opinion about the subject. And I just wrote a bunch of paragraphs, in a stream of consciousness mode. And she ended up using a good chunk of it for the piece. So we will get to that piece. But this was the watch. It is a cushion cased. Sometimes it's also called C-shaped dive watch, a Seamaster 120. So from the perspective of technical specifications, a less capable watch at face value compared to the Seamaster 300, paired with a very distinct three-link style bracelet. And that's a detail that's going to come up in a little bit when I will read with you the GQ piece, Vivian Morelli's piece. But the bracelet is, I think, 1170. It can be a later bracelet as well, but the style of it, from what one can make out on the pictures, makes it look like an 1170 to me. But certainly you can see that it's a three-link bracelet, kind of with semicircular links. 3 rows of semicircular links. And probably with 634 end links. So 1170, 634 would be the bracelet. So GQ picked this up because they were planning to write about it anyways. And they basically picked the brains of Felix Scholz, who has a very German name, but who's based in Australia. And I've seen some of the reels that he did on Instagram. He sounds very Australian to me. So maybe he's of German origin. But anyways, he's part of this piece as well. This is what I meant. Apparently, when they were choosing the visuals for the piece, they had reached out to Omega, who told them that it was a mesh bracelet. I've already showed on my piece, on my post, that it really isn't, for sure. And I expected them to fix it, and I think eventually they will. But speaking on that speculation that I will bring up in a little bit, maybe that detail of a mesh bracelet might come in handy or might become an interesting detail. So this is Vivian Morelli who writes, Daniel Craig may have officially stepped away from MI6, but at the Toronto International Film Festival, the former Bond walked in looking like he never left. Promoting Wake Up Dead Man, a Knives Out mystery, Craig looked as sharp as ever, and while his linen suit and silver fox aura got plenty of attention, it is what was on his wrist that had watch nerds frantically zooming in. This is amazing. I mean, straight out of the gate, she calls me a nerd. That's, I'm used to that. I'm used to that. She kind of made up for it by saying it's the best compliment. Not sure if that's the case, but hey. Spotted wearing a vintage Omega Seamaster 120 reference ST166073, Craig sparked instant chatter. Why this watch? Where did he get it from? And why now? This is no ordinary Omega Seamaster, nicknamed Deep Blue by collectors. The 120 is a dive watch from the early 70s, known for its cushion case and minimalist dial. I think it's actually from late 60s, but again, I don't want to get too pedantic. But what really caught eyes was the mesh bracelet. It really wasn't a mesh bracelet. But again, I don't think that's even the author's fault. They just went by what Omega told them. Sometimes referred to as shark proof. While not originally paired with this reference, it's very 70s, very Bond undercover in Monaco, and very on Craig's tastefully subversive style wavelength. This is great commentary, except it's not based on something factual, but great writing. So what's the deal? Is Craig just flexing his vintage chops, or given how many times he's been a guinea pig for new releases, is something more deliberate going on here? By the way, speaking of which, I'm also not sure if the material is linen. That looks like a cotton jacket to me. But again, I'm getting pedantic here, so let's just move on. So this is the first expert of the article. Craig is an exceptionally loyal brand ambassador for Omega, says Felix Scholz, co-host of OT, the podcast. I think he's also an editor with Revolution Australia. So it could be as simple as him wanting to wear something a little different while still staying on brand. On the other hand, Omega has been very tactical with watches Craig wears in the past. He's often seen wearing unreleased models a little early, so Omega just might be building some attention around vintage divers with an eye for an upcoming release. So far, so good, right? That's also the wavelength that I've been on. Vivian Morelli continues, translation, if Daniel Craig is wearing it, Omega probably wants you to notice. Exactly. Horological consultant and creative director Young Brando of the channel Watches and Style. Guys, we're here. We have arrived. Hi, Ryan. How are you doing, man? Nice to see you. Yes, so we are here. We have arrived. Horological consultant and creative director Young Brando of the channel Watches and Style has his own theory. Well, I mean, theory feels like too elevated of a word to describe what I'm trying to say here, but I'll take it. Of course, the explanation could be rather simple. He is, after all, a retired Bond. This is exactly the kind of piece that you would imagine to find on his wrist, since brands often help curate vintage pieces as well for the collections of their celebrity ambassadors. It might well be a personal choice. So, maybe this is kind of his exit watch from the role. In summary, that's what I wanted to say. right? Because after all, he has famously said before he made one more film, before he made No Time to Die, I would rather slit my wrists, right? So instead of that, he lived through the experience, and all he got was a vintage Omega Seamaster 120 Deep Blue. But that is, of course, rather naive and unsatisfactory as an explanation. Brando continues. Love how I became a Brando suddenly. I'm getting old. Omega, he points out, are the masters of product placement, and no franchise has been more central to their rise than James Bond. And I was making a reference here, of course, to the entire history of Bond's association with Omega, with, of course, Jean-Claude Biver's involvement, starting with GoldenEye and the famous piece there, which, of course, in its own way appeared in a computer game as well. So this is what I was saying. Most recently, Omega even teased a unique Seamaster Diver 300-meter chronograph in the upcoming 007 First Light video game. If you have watched the trailers of that game, and I will want to watch, maybe we can watch it together. Ryan Hoffrey says, another 00 clothing watch stream ASAP, please, YB. Thank you for the super chat. It's possible. I'm not averse to it. What I want to do, maybe not a clothing or watch stream again necessarily, although those can be part of the discussion as well. But I've been in touch with a couple of creators from the Bond sphere on YouTube and elsewhere on the internet. So maybe I can do a collaborative stream with one of them where we talk a little bit about the upcoming computer game, video game, more properly, the watch they teased there, and maybe about this Daniel Craig watch as well. But let me continue here with what I was saying. Of course, most recently, they teased a new watch in the trailers of 007 First Light. So it's not hard to imagine, Morelli continues, this real-world vintage moment as part of a larger narrative, maybe even a reissue. Some of the DMs I received in response to my post are already clamoring for a reissue of the Seamaster 120 Deep Blue, Brando continues. And with the Amazon acquisition of the franchise, rumors of an older Bond making at least a cameo appearance in the new movie abound. And this is a very loose hypothesis that I have, right? Just thinking out loud, wondering maybe there would be an appearance, at least a cameo, by one of the living Bonds, one of the living ex-007s in the new movie. And frankly, I mean, the chances of that itself might be rather low. And if they do that, they would probably not do it with Daniel Craig because he's the most recent one, right? It might be too much of an imposition on the new guy who takes over the role, who takes over the franchise, who picks up the mantle. But then again, we are in the age of these, larger than life, super high budget superhero movies, which love bringing back through alternative universes and other kinds of trapdoors, superheroes who have already hung up the cape, right? So why shouldn't that happen for Bond, especially now that Amazon MGM has picked up the franchise? They might want to build up the interest. They might want to build up the hype for the movie by using a familiar face, even as they give a new chance to someone who has never played the role before as the lead character. And Vivian Morelli here makes a reference to the fact that I predicted the Swatch Blancpain collaboration more than 6 months in advance on Instagram. Again, I was just speculating, but it was an educated guess, and I called it Thrifty Fathoms. Some of you guys might remember that post. I will share it here again in the chat, so feel free to go back to it. And Morelli says, so is the Seamaster 120 just a cool vintage pick, or is it a breadcrumb for what's next for Omega and Bond? If there's one thing we have learned from years of decoding Craig's watch game, nothing is accidental. And maybe, just maybe, 007 isn't quite done with him yet. That would be interesting, right? I would love to see him reappear in some way in the franchise. But again, even if my speculations have some grain of truth in there, I think there's a good chance that they might actually involve someone who's probably more than a few years removed from the role, right? Probably someone like Brosnan, for example, would be an interesting pick for that. And that's why, when I was speculating here, I was saying like, it would be something, yeah, of course, we are seeing it on Daniel Craig's wrist, but I would imagine a watch like this on the wrist of someone like the Kincaid, right? The groundkeeper of the Skyfall estate from the movie with the same title that was played by Albert Finney. And in the post, I was saying that that character was initially written for Sean Connery, to make a cameo in 2012's Skyfall. And then, it was decided that it might be a little too confusing, that it might prove a little confusing for the spectator. But again, times have changed, and they might, in fact, do that now. So this is the post that I made to celebrate this feature. I just dropped a link to that. If any of you follow me on Instagram, or even if you don't, please do follow and drop a like and even a comment here to this post and join the celebration, so to speak. I really do appreciate you all. Thank you so much. I don't think if it wasn't for the push that I've received from my community, I don't think I would have gotten anywhere close to here. But really, it's only the beginning. You guys know I like warming up anyways by some of the stuff that I've posted on Instagram. I have pinned the link already, I think, but let me double check. No, I didn't. If any of you wants to join me on the panel, I would love that. I will go for at least another hour, but if I get 5 super chats of $5 or more in the next hour, I will go at least until midnight. So if you want to encourage me, if you want to support my work, that would be splendid. That would be really helpful. And I've just started that as a goal. So we're looking at Flavio Briatore, who perhaps from the F1 grid is the closest thing we have to an international man of mystery. He is now the de facto team principal of Alpine F1. And here he is at the 2025 F1 Italian Grand Prix. And he wears the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Offshore Diver in stainless steel with the khaki green dial. That's reference 15720, pardon, ST. I love calling Briatore the de facto principal, not only because it most aptly describes the nuances of his existence on the contemporary Formula One grid, but also because that title makes it sound like he's the self-proclaimed leader of some distant country that barely anyone can place on the world map, which means that Flavio can basically do whatever he wants, including wearing whatever he pleases from his own watch collection. I'm saying this because, of course, H. Moser, a company, the Moser watches have been endorsing Alpine F1 or Alpine for the second season in a row now. And everyone else in the team, at least the drivers, always sports a Moser watch. And they have also recently, as you guys know, came up with two distinct watches to mark their partnership. One called the Mechanics Edition, one called the Drivers Edition, one being an open-worked mechanical chronograph, the other being kind of a smartwatch of sorts. But, you know, Flavio Briatore couldn't possibly care less about something like that. So he wears his own watches, oftentimes AP Patek, which I've profiled to a large extent. And I was also sharing here that this model actually grew out of a collaboration that AP did with Vempe back in 2005. It was just a limited run, exclusive to Vempe's boutiques. And the piece was then called the Scuba, right? This time and date version of the Royal Oak Offshore with a diver aesthetic, with a rotatable bezel. It was popular enough that they made a run for their own boutiques in a few different colors, but it took until 2010 for the watch to be integrated into the AP catalog, and by then it was more familiar to what we know now and was called properly Royal Oak Offshore Diver. This is what he's wearing, and this is him showing the time at Zandvoort, actually, so at the Dutch Grand Prix, which was right before the Italian. Since I didn't want anyone to understand or think that I was trying to diss Moser with that post, I wanted to share this. This is from the US Open when Trump was in the Rolex suite for the men's final, contested between Alcaraz and Senna, of course, which Alcaraz won. My guy, I love that guy. So I was really happy about that. Trump came with the family. So Jared Kushner was there, and his granddaughter, Arabella Kushner, was there as well. This frame captures the three of them. And there was a very interesting watch that I didn't expect to really see on Jared Kushner's wrist. But then again, it makes sense, right? You know, Cellini is one of the biggest dealers, I think, of Moser. And I'm sure he swung by that store a few times. And I'm not actually surprised that he might have ended up getting one of these, and maybe a bunch of other watches as well. But this is probably my favorite iteration of a movement that I really like, favorite rendition, I should say, because this movement was conceived for Moza under a previous regime of ownership by the famous watchmaker Andreas Strehler, who mostly operates as an independent watchmaker now, does his own thing. But over the years, now almost 2 decades, Moza used this movement, variations of this movement, all across their lineup, in Streamliners, in Pioneers. This is an Endeavor, in Tantalum, and with a stunning Grand Feu blue enamel dial that they call Abyss Blue. It's a very, very unique, very original piece. And again, it's not something that you see on a public figure's wrist. Yeah, much less a public figure's wrist. I mean, I haven't seen it in, you know, I haven't actually seen it on anyone's wrist, right? The only time I saw these pieces were actually at Cellini, not even in the wild, so to speak. So I was, this was an interesting watch spot for me. I couldn't help but share, and I know literally because I shared this, I lost a number of followers. I couldn't possibly care less. You know, I had this discussion before with people. Nowadays, I don't even bother to respond in the comments. I just either don't respond or delete if it's really ridiculous and insulting to me or to the people who are documented here. People should understand that this, again, this is an open platform. It's primarily about watches. I have featured anyone from Saddam Hussein to the Shah of Iran to Bashar al-Assad to Donald Trump and Jared Kushner to Che Guevara to just anybody, right? I couldn't possibly care less about people's political leanings, whether they align with me or not. It's not a consideration at all, right? In this case, it may not. If I were to only choose watches that appear on the wrists of people who agree with me with 100%, one, I couldn't make much of any content. Two, I would be a miserable person indeed, right? We are here to take joy in recognizing watches, in understanding them, and in getting to know more about them. And if anyone, at any rate, had a chance to read the caption, you would instantly realize that I was talking about this brilliant movement that Andreas Strehler made for Moza more than anything. It won the Complicated Watch Award at the GPHG all the way back in 2006, fresh out of the oven, so to speak. The elegant expression of the complication quietly disposes a major source of dread for the initiate, the difficulty of adjusting, correcting, and maintaining a perpetual calendar. The patented double pull crown allows for the adjustment of the date forwards and backwards, and it has an impressive 7-day power reserve, right? Thanks to its dual spring barrel, which means that the need for such corrections are in fact minimized, right? Because when you fully crank it up, you have 7 days of maximal, precise movement that therefore takes away the need for making excessive corrections anyways. The flash calendar version, which is also one of the reasons that they use their own big date display, jumps instantaneously at midnight, and of course at the end of the month, and never displays an invalid date. And you guys know this is a second cent, of course. That is the date at 3 o'clock. At 9 o'clock, there's a power reserve indicator, and this micro hand that is deployed right under the hand stack actually shows the month, right? There are 12 positions for the hours. There are 12 months, so it's pretty straightforward to use the dial for that. There is actually also a leap year indicator integrated into the movement that you can glimpse through the sapphire crystal exhibition case back. It's a beautiful piece, and I like the tantalum, the combination of the tantalum and this rich blue enamel dial, which has a lot of texture. I mean, the case is beautifully finished. The dial is really a stunning creation, really artistic. What a great piece. This is something that I came across a couple of months back, but I did my best to source a picture of the actual watch. But since it is since it is a special order, I wasn't able to. So for the second time, and this is something I started doing recently with pieces that are one of a kind or that are so unique that you can't find online or through other sources, good quality photographs of great examples. So I use Google Gemini to create a mock-up of how the watch might actually look like in real life, or rather separately from the person's wrist. So in this case, we are looking at Rocco Basilico and his new bride, Sonia Ammar, and they are celebrating their wedding in Capri. I think this was back in July, I want to say. At any rate, it's from this past summer. Rocco Basilico is the president of the eyewear brand Oliver Peoples and the chief wearables officer for Luxottica, right? And if you wear any glasses or sunglasses that are made in Italy, chances are that they're made by these people, by his people. He's one of the two heirs of Leonardo Del Vecchio, who are leading the company today, along with Leonardo Del Vecchio, the son, and here Rocco Basilico. They have been doing really well, actually. Obviously, they have the partnership with Meta as well, with Ray-Ban and Oakley, right, for the Meta sunglasses as well. And he was wearing a new special order version of the Cartier Crash, right, which caught my eye almost immediately. So I started asking around, have you guys, I sent out feelers, have you guys seen any special order Cartier Crashes in yellow gold with a black dial? Guild numerals, just couldn't find it. And finally, I found a reliable platform where I can actually create a decent mockup, which in this case gave me this. It's a great looking watch, honestly, but I was talking about here how, due to its cult status and relative rarity in regular production, the Crash was perhaps one of the more popular choices for the now phased out Cartier NSO new special order program, where collectors could commission customized examples of the Maison's horological creations. The surrealist design, conceived in collaboration between Jean-Jacques Cartier, the leader of the London branch, and the designer Rupert Emerson, was meant to capture the psychedelic vibes of London's swinging 60s. It was first presented in 1967. Today, after especially the discontinuation of the new special order program, the only Cartier Crash in regular production is the platinum version that remains exclusive to the New Bond Street boutique in London, understood to be allocated to VIP clients of the Maison in no more than 2 examples per month. So that was both a great watch and a good occasion to talk about the discontinuation or the phasing out of the new special order program by Cartier, which may or may not come back. I think, as always, these sorts of high prestige houses have some sort of bespoke program at any rate, where they, at probably an eye-watering price point, where they still create one-of-a-kind pieces. But the NSO was, I think, kind of an intermediary program, so to speak, where people could really use their imaginations to customize pieces as had never done before, as long as it fits into Cartier's general aesthetic and as long as it made sense within their design language. And I think a lot of people thought that they were essentially getting one-of-a-kind pieces. But of course, that was never the case. In fact, people signed apparently documents that made it pretty clear that never was the case. Nevertheless, I think that whole discussion, that whole disgruntlement about certain people being disappointed with basically not being given one-of-a-kind, pièce unique creations at a minimal markup to retail pricing was what brought the program down, I think, eventually, which is a real shame for Cartier collectors. I'm not one, so I'm not really beating myself up about it. Here's another interesting thing. Of course, people were speaking of pièce unique, speaking of one-of-a-kind pieces. Ed Sheeran just came out with his new album, Play. His 8th studio album. People were mostly talking about the one-of-a-kind Big Pilot perpetual calendar that he was wearing that fits the pink theme of this album. And I mean, fair enough, right? That's I think that's a more interesting watch. Obviously, that's a one-of-a-kind watch. It fits the larger theme that was supported with this whole extended launch, because Ed Sheeran went so far as to introduce a new ice cream flavor at Van Leuven called Play Pink. like a neon pink colored ice cream flavor, and also did a capsule collaboration with Kid Super. Um, so a very Brooklyn kind of launch overall. And in that launch of the capsule collection, he did a photo shoot with the founder and still the director of Kid Super. I mean, Kid Super himself, you can say, Colm Dillon. And there he was wearing a very humble IWC. Ed Sheeran was wearing the Mark 20, Mark XX, I should perhaps say, self-winding pilot's watch in stainless steel on a matching 5-link bracelet. It is much more humble. It is much more common, but it is just as significant, or perhaps more significant, to IWC's heritage than any big pilot perpetual calendar can be, whether it is a unique creation or not. Because introduced in 2022, Mark 20 represents the most recent generation of IWC's time and date pilot's watches that grew out of the maker's heritage of supplying the Royal Air Force with mil-spec pieces. Since 1993, with the civilian release of Mark 12, these pilot's watches have been available to a wider general public and have been a mainstay of IWC's catalog, even if they have largely stayed in the rather outsized shadow cast by the big pilots. The appearance of the humble Mark 20 on Ed Sheeran's wrist signals the extent of the singer-songwriter's collaboration with the brand that is most certainly not limited to one-of-a-kind example of complicated pieces. One-of-a-kind examples of complicated pieces. And I think that's important, right? Because we know that Ed Sheeran is a watch guy. We know that he has an extensive collection. And I think he will continue to wear other watches, other brands, watches from other brands. However, I think it is a pretty concerted effort that this launch, the launch of Play, coincided with a whole Hodinkee piece on that one-of-a-kind example, which I guess I should talk about next. And then also the fact that he kept it consistent by wearing an IWC for this photo shoot as well. It's not a coincidence. I think he certainly has something going on with IWC that's going to probably result on a couple of more collaborations and events and appearances of IWC watches on his wrist. And I think that's IWC has been doing that quite well of late. I think it was a great coup for them to collaborate with Lewis Hamilton and Brad Pitt for the F1 movie, F1 the movie. And then I think it's also quite significant that a lot of the people who were involved with that movie, are still wearing IWC pieces. Of course, they have still their endorsement with the Mercedes AMG F1 team. And I think they are trying to very wisely choose at least a couple of other collaborators who can give further visibility to their watches, and not only in terms of complicated pieces and limited editions, but also showing the breadth and variety of pieces that they already have in their catalog. And what better watch than the humble Mark 20 to do that. Hey, Robert. Nice to see you, man. I might be here for another 15 minutes or so if I don't reach my goal, but we are still going. Since we talked about Ed Sheeran and his collaboration with IWC, let's take a look at the perpetual calendar that Hodinky featured. Again, it was earlier today, if I'm not mistaken. And this was an extensive photo shoot for the launch of his album Play. And apparently all these photos were provided by Ed Sheeran's photographer, Mark Surridge, to Hodinky. And he is wearing a very special version, a pink dialed version of the IWC Big Pilot perpetual calendar in white ceramic with a pink dial, which fits, of course, the visual theme of the album. But it turns out that it is not as simple as just the dial. First of all, the standard version of the Big Pilot perpetual calendar has the seconds at 9 o'clock. Within that subdial, this piece has a sweep center seconds hand. So there's that modification. There is right at 4:30 the play symbol and writing. So the album's name is there at 4:30. And I guess to balance out the absence of the small seconds hand from the subdial at 9 o'clock, they have also removed the power reserve indicator from the subdial at 3 o'clock. And again, preserving the larger visual balance of the dial, they have also removed the two big jets that flank the moon phase indicator, or that are rather at 11 and 1 o'clock, roughly. Yeah, this is pretty cool. I mean, generally, I think the Big Pilot perpetual calendar is a little too big for my taste. Pardon me. I'm reminded of how Lewis Hamilton was talking shit about that earlier this season. Ferrari kind of, I think it was, they were doing simulator, but they released a video with Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton when they were talking about wearing their watches when they were at the simulator, and or when they were actually driving a car. My memory is starting to play tricks on me, but Lewis Hamilton was saying, like, of course, when I was with my older team, I had to wear this watch that literally was dragging down my left wrist. And obviously, he is kind of harping on those outsized dimensions of IWC's Big Pilot series. It was something he said in good jest. Of course, he wasn't really talking major shit about a previous endorsement, but obviously compared to how Richard Mille wears, especially when it's in their quartz TPT range, to how a Big Pilot watch wears, whether it's complicated or not, obviously it's going to be a noticeable difference between the two. But yeah, here is his Play Big Pilot Perpetual Calendar with the pink dial and those minor, but I would say significant modifications. You know, I really like it. Right, I'm not a huge fan of this shade of pink on a dial color, but I love the design modifications that have been done to bring out something so balanced. Because again, it's a very distinct aesthetic, the Big Pilot, but it's an extremely busy dial, right? I don't want to choose something that's so different. But yeah, let's just go with the white ceramic with a black dial, and you'll see what I mean instantly in terms of the small modifications on Ed Sheeran's watch that make a big difference, because this is what the watch looks like originally. Right, you see there are these two jets here right under 1 and 11. There's a small seconds indicator or small seconds subdial register at 9 o'clock. There's a power reserve indicator at 3 o'clock, both of which are gone. The album's symbol goes right here, which actually ends up serving as a counterbalance to the 4-digit indicator of the year. And then overall, you have something that's incredibly visually balanced. These are just huge pieces, honestly. It's really not me. But anyway, it is there. For those who like it. I guess I kind of like the oversized crown. That's my favorite part of these kinds of watches. But yeah, the case size is literally, I think, 46 plus. So to me, it's damn near unwearable. You know, I might as well, like the original pilots wore it, you know, strap it on my quad or something, right? You know, that's the only way I can respectably wear something like this. But again, in terms of its design details, in terms of the modifications, I really like what Ed Sheeran has done here. It looks great on the white rubber strap, the white ceramic. Again, it's not the most intricate and complex treatment of a ceramic watch. The finishing is rather monotonous and one-dimensional. Nevertheless, I think it's a fresh aesthetic. It brings something different to the table. They have a lot of relatively affordable, interesting options when it comes to the chronographs in terms of the different colors of ceramic that they have introduced. So that's something that one can easily explore. But what I like here is not only the one-of-a-kind Big Pilot Perpetual Calendar that came out of this launch, but the teasing of a broader collaboration between Ed Sheeran and IWC, because the launch of the merch, the launch of the capsule collection that Ed Sheeran did with Kid Super, actually was showing him wearing something much more humble, much more simple, the classic time and date pilot watch, Mark 20 in stainless steel on the matching bracelet and 40 millimeters in diameter. I think it is much more traditional fit. All right, I think I will wrap it up. There's not much of any conversation or questions in the chat. There's not much of additional support or encouragement in terms of super chats, but I do remain grateful to Ryan, who contributed the sole super chat of the night. I talked about my feature at the British GQ about the vintage diver that appeared on Daniel Craig's wrist in Toronto and what that might mean, about the future of collaborations between Omega and Bond, and perhaps the part that Daniel Craig might still have to do with it. We have talked a little bit about what I have featured on my feed, on my mood board, so to speak, on Instagram. The AP Royal Oak Offshore Diver on Flavio Biriotere's wrist, the Moza Endeavor Perpetual Calendar Tantalum Blue that appeared on Jared Kushner's wrist, the Cartier New Special Order Crash in 18 karat yellow gold with a black dial, gilt Roman numerals on Rocco Basilico's wrist, and finally the Mark 20 on Ed Sheeran's wrist and his wider collaborations with IWC. Please hit the like button. I appreciate your spectatorship, if nothing else. If you want to support the channel, of course, YouTube gives you a number of ways. You can leave a comment after the live stream ends, and in fact, leave that as a super thanks to show your support. You can, of course, get a channel membership for yourself or gift it to someone, gift channel memberships to others, which give access to a nice archive of exclusive content. And again, as this support grows, it allows me to produce more of that content, and of course, hopefully in higher quality too. So that's something else that you might want to take into consideration. If you want to help in other ways, I outline them in the video description as well. You can always reach me again through comments on videos here on YouTube, or reach out to me directly via DMs on Instagram. So please follow me on Instagram for that, for me to see your messages sooner than later. Hit the like button on the way out. I'll most certainly see you in the next one. I hope until then you stay safe, stay healthy, wear and enjoy your watches. Goodbye.